I know that you're gathered here this week to talk about how advances in technology, specifically cloud computing, is leading to new models of collaboration in the scientific community. And as Seamus pointed out, what I would like to do this morning is actually cast a slightly broader net, have a look at how these same technologies combined with other forces like demographics are leading to a wide set of changes in a whole range of other institutions, including education, healthcare, government, and democracy, and of course in business. And I'll reflect quite a bit about how business is changing, but how that provides a window into how there can be new fusion, new collaboration, interaction between the business community and the scientific community and other aspects of society as well. Before I get into all of that, though, I thought I would step back a little bit and give you a little bit of some background story on how we came to these conclusions and how the concept of mass collaboration itself came to be. And it's sort of an interesting journey because it was 2004 and Don and I were both involved in a research project, and we were trying to understand the connection between, or the relationship between, information technology and competitive advantage in industry. And it seemed like a fairly straightforward hypothesis at the time that we would look at the world's most advanced companies and we would understand how they were using that to drive better models of innovation, business intelligence, better relationships with customers, and so forth. And we certainly found a lot of evidence that that was true. But what we also discovered, actually, was that some of the most innovative uses of technology were not necessarily in the world's biggest, most advanced multinational corporations. Actually, the truth was that some of the most interesting and dynamic uses of technology were sort of out in the cloud, so to speak, right? It was the thousands, sometimes even millions of individuals who were using this new platform for collaboration to do incredible things, and among those incredible things was Wikipedia. And I know that this crowd here obviously is deeply familiar with Wikipedia and its recent success, but you still have to stand back occasionally and kind of reflect on the fact that millions of people collaborating together have produced an encyclopedia that is 15 times larger than its closest comparator, Encyclopedia Britannica. Now, it's not, not every entry is of the highest quality, but if you look, a growing number of the content, growing scope and quality of Wikipedia is quite impressive. And, Wikipedia was really just one example. Then, of course, there was Linux. And, Linux, in many ways, next week, actually, I'm going to Tokyo to speak to the Linux Foundation. And I was on the phone with the president of the Linux Foundation, and he told me, I was kind of curious, what had happened since we published the book, and he said, Linux continues to explode, and I know we have a lot of Linux users here, but you may not appreciate exactly how far this revolution has, taken us. He said, a lot of the companies that have installed Linux recently, over the past 2-3 years, used to be quite passive users. They would kind of take the Linux kernel, they would take the various software components, install it in their enterprise, but they weren't necessarily giving anything back to the community. They weren't active participants in developing Linux. Well, that has just started to change as companies have started to realize that, in fact, actually the best way to support those customized installations and the best way to take advantage of the innovation is actually to put everything they've done internally back in the commons. So all of a sudden, you've got a situation where every day there's 10,000 new lines of code added to Linux every single day. 6,000 lines are subtracted through a process of trying to weed out the contributions that perhaps don't make sense. Over the course of the year, since September 2008, when I last did an event for the Linux Foundation, 10 million lines of code have been generated around the world through a global collaboration. And for something that started out as a mere hacker experiment, I think that is phenomenal. Now, the Linux Foundation organized a little research exercise and tried to estimate what it would have cost had somebody, say a company, tried to create Linux and all of its various derivatives and components from scratch. And they estimated that the cost of that endeavor would be something roughly equivalent to $10 billion. So if you can imagine, that is a huge, quite a phenomenal figure to contemplate. And the fact that much of this has been done through contributions either voluntarily or people working in companies who have been dedicated to Linux development, I think it's quite a remarkable accomplishment. In fact, even the average ordinary person who doesn't know what Linux is can't escape using Linux on a daily basis, right? Because it runs virtually everything. It's powering all the web servers, it's in the BMWs, it's in your Motorola phones, it's in TiVos, it's it's virtually pervasive today. Now, those two seminal examples, led us to believe that there was a sea change in the way that not just business entities, but all organizations were starting to think about how work gets done and how you take advantage of the enormous talent pool that we have today. Think about the fact that, it's a world of nearly 7 billion people, and granted, many of those people have yet to enter the sort of modern economy. They don't have access to modern electrical grids or, for that matter, the internet. But that, even in itself, is starting to change, and I'll come back to that point in a moment. But what seems to me, is that we've got this incredible opportunity to rethink things like education and healthcare, to rethink government and democracy, to rethink the way that we approach big issues like climate change and find new models to really harness the unique skills, capability, and talent of a global population. So that, in essence, is kind of the thesis of where we're going next. And in fact, we'll have a new book out next year that is exploring all of these various domains. Before we take a peek at some of that thinking, I just thought we would step back and maybe look at some of the forces that are driving this change. And I know these are forces that will be familiar to you, but I think it's worth covering some of this ground in any case. So we have a technology revolution, right, driven by the internet. At the same time, we've got a demographic revolution. We've got a whole generation of young people growing up in a digital world, and that has conditioned their worldview, the way that they interact with other institutions, and I'll have more to say about that in a moment. Those two forces combined are leading to some interesting social changes and definitely some profound economic changes as well. So when I think about the changes and sort of what's interesting and profound about Web 2.0 or social media, I think about the change in the way, the metaphors that we use to describe the internet itself. It was common when the internet first emerged as a mainstream phenomenon to think about it as an information highway. It was in many ways, the paradigm was analogous to cable television. It was kind of a big fat pipe for delivering content to inert or passive consumers. But really, that didn't describe, for me or for many of my colleagues and for many people sitting in this room, I would imagine, the real nature and potential of the internet itself as a many-to-many communications medium in which anybody could add services and content to the network. And I think that is the profound change. I mean, we start to think about the internet not as a pipe for delivering content to households and consumers, but as a global computer that anyone can program. Because every time you are modifying an entry on Wikipedia, you're updating your Facebook profile, perhaps you're uploading the latest data to your blog, reporting on the latest scientific results. In many ways, you are contributing to this vast global tapestry of knowledge. And I think that is something that people are starting to kind of key into, that actually they are real, genuine participants in this new ecosystem. And we don't even fully anticipate or know ultimately where this is going. One thing we do know, though, is that we've got this whole incredible sort of ecosystem of free and open source software that is sort of in the cloud that people can take advantage of today. And that in itself is a pretty neat and interesting change in the nature of software development. The fact that you increasingly don't have to have software running on your computer, you simply access it over the internet. And that in itself becomes even more interesting when you think about the mobile revolution. Right, the fact that increasingly mobile phones will be able to do everything that computers do today, and in fact that is largely already the case, but will be increasingly so in the future. There was a pretty interesting fact that I came across, as I was doing some research for the new book, and it turns out 97% of Tanzanians can access a mobile phone. In one of the world's poorest countries where only 10% of people can actually access a modern electrical grid. So imagine that, 97% can access a mobile phone, but only 10% the modern electrical grid. So that may, for people who are paying close attention, raise questions about, well, how they charge their mobile phones. As it turns out, a lot of people are adopting these kind of small-scale solar power chargers that are helping people accomplish that task. But the point is that a lot of people that were excluded from the digital revolution increasingly have a chance to participate. And in fact, the thing I get excited about, you think about that kind of cloud of open source software and free services. Well, what if the whole